Hello, and welcome back to Feel Learns English. I'm Shafi, your host, and today we're going to explore something very special. Many advanced English learners around the world have been asking for this. They want a long, natural, real-life English listening experience created especially for learners at AC2 level. And that is exactly what today's episode is about. If you've reached this level, let me say this first: congratulations. You've already achieved something very impressive. Most learners never reach this stage. You understand complex ideas, advanced grammar, and a wide range of vocabulary. That alone is a huge achievement. But if you're here, it's because you want more. You don't just want to understand English. You want to feel comfortable in it. You want more natural rhythm, more control, more confidence, and more ease when you speak. You want English to feel effortless, not forced. And the good news is this: that final step from excellent English to truly natural English is absolutely possible. But it requires a very specific kind of practice. It requires real input. That's what we're giving you today. Not textbook English, not scripted dialogues, but real, natural conversation. The kind of English people actually use in everyday life. You'll hear natural expressions, common phrasing, pauses, tone changes, and all those small details that native speakers use without even realizing it. And I'm not doing this alone. Joining me today is someone who truly understands how real English works. A fellow teacher, a pronunciation enthusiast, and someone who spends far too much time listening to how people speak in real life and analyzing every detail. Welcome to the show. Thank you. It's great to be here. And honestly, I love episodes like this. C2 learners are in such an interesting place. They can understand almost everything they hear or read, but they often tell us the same thing again and again. They say things like, "I still don't feel completely natural." "Sometimes I hesitate because something doesn't sound quite right." Or my favorite one, "I understand everything, but I don't sound like the people I listen to." Exactly. And that's what today's episode is really about: closing that final 10% gap. At this level, learning English is no longer about basic grammar rules. It's not about memorizing long vocabulary lists. And it's definitely not about doing boring exercises. Instead, it's about exposure. It's about listening to real language patterns, the rhythm, the flow, the tone, and the small emotional changes hidden inside everyday speech. And before we go any further, there's something important I always tell my advanced students. At the highest level, English is not about perfection. It's about naturalness. It's about choosing the right words for the moment. It's about sounding calm, confident, and spontaneous, not rehearsed or robotic. And the only way to develop that skill is by listening to authentic conversational English. That's exactly what we're going to do together over the next 100 minutes. So let's start with something simple and universal: comfort and confidence in English. Many C2 learners feel confident intellectually. They know the rules. They know the vocabulary. But emotionally, they still feel unsure when they speak. They second-guess themselves. They worry about sounding too formal, too stiff, too much like a textbook. I hear this all the time. People say, "I speak well, but I don't feel like myself in English." And that is such an important point. Your English self should feel like your real self. Relaxed, expressive, funny, thoughtful, curious. So here's a small but powerful mindset shift that can really help. Instead of asking, "How can I avoid mistakes?" try asking, "How can I express myself more naturally?" Exactly. Natural English often comes from small, everyday expressions, phrases you won't always find in textbooks. Things like, "I get what you mean." "I see where you're coming from." "That caught me off guard." "I wasn't expecting that." "That's a good call." "Let me think this through." These phrases aren't fancy. They're not rare idioms. They're just real English, used every day at work, with friends, and in casual conversations. And today, as we move through different topics, daily life, communication, culture, decisions, emotions, work, relationships, and personal preferences, you'll hear these expressions again and again, naturally and in context. That's where the real learning happens. Your brain starts noticing patterns without effort. You don't force it. You don't memorize. You simply listen. And speaking of daily life, let's begin with something everyone can relate to: routines and habits. The way people talk about their routines reveals a lot about natural English. You'll often hear phrases like, "I've been trying to get into a better morning routine." And that's where we'll start. "I'm not really a morning person, but I'm working on it." "I've been telling myself that I need to start exercising again." "I keep saying I'll go to bed earlier, but somehow, here we are." These are the kinds of sentences you hear everywhere. At work, in coffee shops, at the gym, and in relaxed conversations with friends. And they all point to something very human. Everyone is trying to improve something in their life. But not everyone is succeeding all the time. And that's completely normal. What's interesting is how native speakers talk about this. The tone is usually casual, a little self-aware, and often slightly humorous, right? No one says, "I intend to restructure my morning routine for improved productivity." That sounds robotic. No real person talks like that. Instead, people say things like, "I'm trying to get my life together. I'm slowly getting back on track. I'm doing my best, but it's a work in progress." That phrase, "it's a work in progress," is incredibly common. People use it for almost everything: their health, their job, their personal goals, even their relationships. And phrases like this are what make your English sound real. Not academic, not formal, just natural. So here's what we're going to do throughout this episode. We're going to explore these kinds of expressions in real conversation. You'll hear how native speakers actually use them. And you'll hear them again and again. Not in a memorization way, but in a natural exposure way. And remember, the goal today isn't to understand every single word. That's not the point. The goal is to absorb patterns, to notice how thoughts flow, how ideas connect, how tone changes depending on the situation. So with that in mind, let's ease into our first real conversation. We're going to talk about daily routines, morning habits, and the small rituals that shape our day. Because honestly, how someone starts their day says a lot about them. Let's talk about mornings, not in a dramatic or motivational way, but in a real, everyday sense. Everyone has a different relationship with mornings. Some people wake up ready to conquer the world. Others wake up and immediately start negotiating with themselves about getting out of bed. Absolutely. And what's funny is that people love talking about their morning routines. Even people who don't really have one. You'll hear things like, "I'm trying to be more consistent. Some days I'm on top of things, some days not so much. I really wish I were one of those early riser people." And expressions like "on top of things," "not so much," and "early riser" are not textbook English. They're casual, everyday phrases you hear all the time. Let's imagine a realistic situation. You're having coffee with a friend before work. You ask how their morning is going, and they say something like, "Well, I woke up on time," which is already a win for me. "But then I got distracted scrolling on my phone, and suddenly half an hour disappeared." Every native speaker knows that feeling. Time just evaporates. Or someone might say, "I was doing great, and then I remembered I forgot to set the dishwasher last night. Now my whole morning feels off." That phrase, "my whole morning feels off," is very natural. It doesn't mean anything terrible happened. It just means something feels slightly wrong, slightly out of rhythm. And this shows how much English is built around small emotional states. People don't usually say, "My morning was inefficient due to unexpected circumstances." They say, It threw me off. I lost my rhythm. I got sidetracked. I was all over the place. These are extremely common expressions, and advanced learners really need to hear them in context. Another very common topic is healthy habits. You'll often hear things like, "I'm trying to drink more water." "I'm trying to cut back on coffee, but it's not going well." "I told myself I'd go for a run this morning." Spoiler alert, I didn't. And yes, spoiler alert is very natural and very conversational. It's playful. And that playfulness is a big part of sounding natural in English. Because most humor in English isn't about telling jokes. It's about tone, timing, and self-awareness. It's small lines like, "I had every intention of being productive today," and then reality hit. And everyone understands exactly what that means. I blinked, and somehow it was already lunchtime. Today has completely gotten away from me. Expressions like these are everyday English gold, especially for C2 learners. You hear them all the time, and they instantly sound natural. What's really interesting is this: when we talk about daily routines, we're not just talking about schedules. We're talking about identity. People often describe who they are through their habits. They say things like, "I'm a slow starter." "I'm a night owl." "I'm not fully human until I've had my first cup of coffee." These sentences sound simple, but they're full of natural language and personality. Exactly. And if you want to sound more like a native speaker, one of the best things you can do is pay attention to how people describe themselves. It's rarely very direct. It's usually playful, light, or a little metaphorical. For example, "I function at about 40% in the morning." "I'm just not built for early mornings." "My brain takes a while to boot up." Native speakers hear these kinds of expressions constantly. I love that last one, boot up. It's a fun way to compare your brain to a computer starting up. And metaphors like this are everywhere in English, especially in casual conversation. Exactly. They make the language feel more alive and more human. Now let's shift the conversation slightly. We've talked about mornings and routines, so let's move into something closely connected to that: motivation. The way people talk about motivation in English is very specific and very informal. That's so true. People don't usually say, "My motivation levels fluctuate depending on external factors." Instead, they say things like, "I'm trying to get my act together." "I'm not as motivated as I'd like to be." "I'm working on it slowly." "I just can't seem to get into the right headspace." These sentences communicate feelings, not just information. Exactly. And here's one phrase every English learner should know, because it's everywhere. "I'm doing my best." It's simple, but it's powerful. And it works in almost any situation. You can use it when talking about work, health, habits, relationships, anything. Another very common phrase is, "I'm trying to find my balance." This phrase can mean many different things depending on the context and the tone. Right. It's not about physical balance. It's about emotional and mental balance. It's about finding a healthy rhythm while managing all the things in your life. And speaking of managing things, juggling is another everyday word people use. You'll hear, "I'm juggling a lot right now." "I've got a lot on my plate." "I'm just trying to keep everything together." These expressions help you sound human, relatable, and emotionally aware. And that's what advanced English is really about. Not sounding perfect, but sounding real. Exactly. And the best way to build this skill is through exposure. Not scripted textbook dialogues. Not artificial practice conversations. But real English, spoken naturally, the way people talk when they're just being themselves. Now, let's go a bit deeper. We're going to move into how people talk about stress and how they try to manage it. This is a universal topic, and the English expressions around it are extremely valuable for advanced learners. Yes, that's a great direction. Stress touches everyone. Work stress, life stress, emotional stress, even social stress. And the way people talk about it reveals a lot about natural English. You'll often hear things like, "I've been feeling a bit overwhelmed." "I'm stretched pretty thin right now." "I'm trying not to burn out." "It's been a really hectic week." These expressions aren't dramatic or extreme. They're normal, everyday language. And because they're so common, when you start using them naturally, your English immediately sounds more native-like. Exactly. And we're going to explore this even further. How people talk about emotions, pressure, relationships, and social situations. These are the areas where advanced English really comes to life. But for now, let's gently close the topic of morning routines, carry this natural phrasing forward, and move into our next section. We're going to talk about how people describe pressure, stress, and emotional balance in everyday English. Because honestly, the vocabulary in this area is pure gold. So let's ease into it. Almost everyone deals with stress, pressure, and mental load, whatever you want to call it. And what's interesting is that native speakers rarely talk about stress in a dramatic or formal way. It's usually subtle, understated, and very conversational. Exactly. People don't always say the word stress, but they still communicate it very clearly. You'll hear things like, "I've got a lot going on right now." "I'm feeling a little overwhelmed." "I'm running on low battery this week." "I'm hanging in there, but it's a lot." None of these sentences include the word stress, but the message is obvious. And that's exactly why expressions like these are so important for C2 learners. Advanced English isn't about using complicated vocabulary. It's about sounding human. It's about sounding like someone who lives in the real world, not like someone answering questions on a language exam. One of the most natural expressions you'll ever hear is, "I'm trying to keep my head above water." It simply means you're managing. You're coping. You're not drowning in responsibilities. And you'll hear this phrase everywhere, at work, at home, and in conversations with friends. Sometimes, stress is described in a slightly humorous way. For example, someone might say, "I'm one minor inconvenience away from losing it." "I'm at capacity." "My brain has left the chat." That last one, "my brain has left the chat," comes from internet culture, but it's now very common in everyday speech. It's playful, but it clearly communicates mental exhaustion in a very relatable way. And here's another interesting thing. People often use metaphors to talk about their emotional limits. You'll hear phrases like, "I'm burned out." "I'm drained." "I'm fried." "I've hit a wall." "My brain is fried." These aren't technical or academic terms. They come from real life, and they help you feel the emotional tone of the conversation immediately. Exactly. And one expression I hear all the time is, "I'm doing my best to stay grounded." This means you're trying to stay calm, stable, and centered, even when life feels busy or chaotic. Let's give listeners a quick example of a very natural conversation, something you might hear between coworkers or friends. "Hey, are you doing okay? You seem a little off lately." "Yeah, I'm all right. I'm just juggling too much at the moment." "Is there anything I can help with?" "Not really, but thanks. I just need to catch my breath." That short exchange is packed with native expressions. A little off, juggling too much, catch my breath. They communicate emotion without being dramatic or heavy. Exactly. Another very common phrase is, "I just need a minute." Sometimes it literally means 1 minute. Other times it means, "I need some time to calm down or reset." The tone matters more than the words themselves. So let's go a bit deeper into the language people use when they're trying to reset, get back on track, or manage stress. You'll often hear things like, "I'm trying to slow down." "I need to clear my head." "I'm taking things one day at a time." "I'm trying not to overthink everything." That phrase, "one day at a time," is universal. It's used in almost every English-speaking country. And it's not only about stress. People use it for anything that feels overwhelming, like a big project, a new job, or new responsibilities. It's a realistic and comforting way to talk about progress without pressure. Another extremely common expression is, "I'm giving myself some grace." That means you're being kind to yourself. You're not expecting perfection. Yes, and this is something many advanced learners really need to hear. They often put too much pressure on themselves to speak perfectly. But real English is full of small mistakes, pauses, hesitations, self-corrections. Even native speakers do this all the time. Exactly. That's why listening to long, natural conversations is so valuable. It helps you understand that English isn't a performance, it's a tool. Let me add one more expression you'll hear constantly. I'm trying to find my rhythm again. People use this when they feel off balance or out of sync and want to regain stability. And that connects naturally to another everyday topic, energy and motivation. People love talking about their energy levels, usually in a joking or self-aware way. You'll hear things like, "I'm running on fumes." "I have zero energy left." "I'm wiped out." "I'm absolutely done for the day." "I hit my limit hours ago." All of these expressions clearly communicate exhaustion in a very natural, very human way. But it's usually done in a light, friendly way, right? And here's an important nuance every advanced learner needs to understand. Native speakers often use exaggeration to express emotion in a way that feels relatable but still casual. For example, "I'm exhausted." "I'm dead tired." "I could sleep for a week." None of these are meant literally, but everyone understands exactly what the speaker means. Exactly. And sometimes the exaggeration becomes even more dramatic and more humorous. You might hear things like, "My social battery is at 1%. I'm emotionally unavailable until I get food. If I don't sleep soon, I'm going to start malfunctioning." This kind of language shows up constantly in real life, at work, at school, with friends, and especially in group chats. And speaking of work, let's shift the conversation to how people talk about workload, responsibilities, and workplace stress. This is an area where many advanced learners struggle. They often know the formal vocabulary, but they don't always know the everyday expressions people actually use. Exactly. Most learners can say, "I have a lot of tasks to complete." But native speakers usually say, "I'm swamped." "I'm buried in work." "I've got deadlines piling up." "I'm trying to stay on top of everything." "I've got way too much on my plate." These expressions are natural, casual, and extremely common in modern workplaces, right? And another interesting point is how people talk about productivity. The language is emotional, not technical. You almost never hear someone say, "My productivity levels were suboptimal today." Instead, they say things like, "I couldn't focus." "I kept getting distracted." "I just wasn't feeling it today." "My brain refused to cooperate." "I got nothing done." That last one, "I got nothing done," is one of the most common phrases you'll hear in offices. Now, let's continue in this direction and move into a more nuanced topic, boundaries and personal space in everyday English. This is an especially important area for C2 learners. These expressions are used constantly in the US, the UK, Canada, Australia, basically every English-speaking country. And they're valuable because they show emotional intelligence and social awareness. Absolutely. Before we move on, let's quickly summarize the key idea from this section. Native speakers usually talk about stress using metaphors, understatement, humor, and emotional nuance, not formal or academic language. If you start using these patterns yourself, your English immediately sounds more natural. All right, let's move into boundaries, communication, and emotional space, another area where advanced English really shines. This is something a lot of people struggle with, even native speakers. Boundaries come up all the time in workplaces, friendships, relationships, and even casual conversations. And the language people use is very natural, very common, and extremely useful at AC2 level. What's interesting is that most learners don't really study this kind of language in school. You learn how to talk about your job, your hobbies, your family, but you don't always learn how to say, "I need space." I'm not comfortable with that. That doesn't work for me. And yet, these are phrases you hear constantly in real life. And boundaries don't have to be dramatic or aggressive. They're often very normal and very soft. For example, here are some everyday phrases native speakers use all the time. I need some time to myself. I'm not in the right headspace for that right now. I appreciate the offer, but I'm going to pass. That feels like a bit too much for me. I'm trying to protect my peace. That last one, protect my peace, is very modern and widely used, especially in the US. It simply means keeping your emotional state calm and stable. And notice how gentle these expressions are. Native speakers rarely say something like, "I do not want to engage in that activity." Instead, they say, "That's not really my thing. I'm going to sit this one out. I think I'll skip this time. That doesn't work for me." For social plans and really for anything that doesn't align with your needs. Let's look at a realistic example. "Hey, we're all going out after work. You in?" "I'd love to, but I need to recharge tonight." Totally get it. Next time. Now notice that phrase, "I need to recharge." It simply means you need rest. That rest could be physical, emotional, or social. Native speakers use this expression all the time. Exactly. And here's another very common one. "I need a little breathing room." That's a gentle way of saying you need space, either literally or emotionally. Another phrase you'll hear often is, "I'm setting some boundaries for myself." This means you're trying to be healthier, calmer, and more balanced, and you're letting others know where your limits are. Now let's talk about communication, especially when you need to be honest, but still kind. This is a huge part of real-life English, and it's something advanced learners really need. Native speakers often use softening phrases. These are expressions that make a message sound less harsh and more respectful. For example, "I might be wrong, but I'm not sure how to put this, but can I be honest with you for a second? Here's how I'm seeing it." These phrases show emotional intelligence. They also create space for open and honest conversation, right? And here's another important one. "That made me feel a bit uncomfortable." This is a direct but respectful way to express your feelings. And it's extremely common in both professional and personal situations. You'll also hear things like, "I'd prefer if we didn't go in that direction." "I'm not sure that tone is helpful right now. I need a minute to process that." Again, these expressions show awareness, sensitivity, and social understanding. Exactly. And here's something crucial. Native speakers rely heavily on tone and phrasing to express nuance, not just vocabulary. That's why advanced learners benefit so much from long-form listening like this. You begin to understand how meaning changes with rhythm, softness, and pauses. Now, let's move into a related but slightly lighter topic, social energy and social preferences. In modern English-speaking cultures, people talk constantly about managing their energy, needing space, avoiding crowded events, balancing social time with rest. You'll hear phrases like, "My social battery is running low." "I'm not really in a social mood today." "I love hanging out, but I need downtime afterward." "I get overwhelmed in big groups." "I'm more of a small group person." These aren't confessions or weaknesses. They're simply normal ways of describing personal preferences. And notice how natural these expressions sound. They're relatable. They're soft. They feel familiar. Another very common phrase is, "I'm trying to find the right balance." We talked about balance earlier, but here it specifically means balancing social time with rest. People use this phrase constantly. Let's look at another realistic mini dialogue. "Are you coming to the party tonight?" I think I'm going to stay home. I've had a long week. No worries. Rest up. Yeah, I just need a quiet night. That conversation is simple, natural, and full of everyday English. Now, let's go a little deeper. Boundaries and emotional space also come up in friendships and relationships. People say things like, I need to take a step back. I'm not in the best place emotionally. I need to set healthier limits. I care, but I also need some space. I don't have the capacity for this right now. These expressions are honest, but gentle. They allow you to communicate clearly without being harsh. And this is incredibly important for advanced learners. If you can express emotional nuance in English, you're not just fluent, you're socially fluent. Now let's move into a new topic that builds naturally from this: preferences, decisions, and personal choices. This area is full of everyday language. Talking about what you like or don't like. Making decisions. Hesitating. Changing your mind. We'll explore all of that next because the vocabulary around decisions is rich, practical, and used constantly in real life. But before we transition, here's the key takeaway from this section. Advanced English lives in soft language. The kind of language that shows emotion, boundaries, preferences, hesitation, tone, and connection. And when you start to feel comfortable using this kind of language, you unlock a whole new level of natural fluency. All right, now let's move into our next topic: how native speakers talk about preferences, decisions, and personal tastes. This is one of the most useful areas of everyday English at the C2 level, because this is something every native speaker deals with constantly. Making choices, expressing likes and dislikes, hesitating, changing their mind. And the way people talk about these things is almost never direct or formal. Exactly. When someone asks a native speaker what they prefer, the answer is rarely a simple yes or no. Instead, you hear phrases that show personality, politeness, uncertainty, confidence, sometimes all at the same time. For example, I'm not picky, but I do have preferences. I'm flexible. Whatever works for you. I'm not crazy about that idea. I could go either way. I'm leaning toward this one. These expressions are very natural and very conversational. They're the language of everyday decisions: what to eat, where to go, whether to join a plan, or how you feel about an option. Right? And one of the most common expressions you'll ever hear is, I'm not sure yet. People often add, I'm still thinking it through. It's gentle. It's honest. And it's extremely common. Another phrase you hear all the time is, let me sleep on it. This simply means, let me decide tomorrow, or let me think about it after I've had some rest. Yes. And here's a very natural expression related to hesitation. I'm on the fence. It means you haven't decided yet. You're somewhere in the middle. And what's great about this phrase is that you can use it for almost anything: work decisions, personal decisions, or even small choices like what to order for dinner. Exactly. Now let's talk about how native speakers express strong preferences without sounding rude or aggressive. For example, I'm really into this. I'm a huge fan of that. That's totally my thing. That doesn't really do it for me. I'm not big on that. These expressions sound friendly and natural, not harsh or confrontational. And notice how many different ways English has to say I don't like this without actually saying those words. You'll hear things like, I'm not big on it. It's not really my vibe. It's not my cup of tea. I'm not sold on it. It's not quite what I'm looking for. All of these are soft, polite, and socially aware ways of expressing an opinion. Another great one is, it's growing on me. This means you didn't like something at first, but now you're starting to like it more. Exactly. And the opposite is, I'm over it. That means you liked something before, but you don't anymore. Let's look at a short, natural mini dialogue using these expressions. Do you want to watch that new show tonight? I'm on the fence. I'm not sure if it's my vibe. We could try one episode and see. Yeah, why not? Maybe it'll grow on me. Every line in that exchange is something real people say every day. Now let's move into another major area of natural English, making plans. In English-speaking cultures, plans are rarely decided immediately. There's usually negotiation, flexibility, hesitation, and lots of softening language. Exactly. Here are some very common expressions related to plans. Let's play it by ear. Let's see how the day goes. I'll keep you posted. I'll let you know closer to the time. I'm not sure yet. I might have something. These expressions are essential if you want to sound natural when talking about future plans. Another phrase you'll hear constantly is, "Sounds good to me." It's simple, friendly, and extremely common. And here's something every C2 learner should understand. Native speakers often respond indirectly when they're not fully committed to something. For example, maybe, "We'll see. I'll think about it. I'll see how I feel. Let me check my schedule." Very often, these don't mean a clear yes. They usually mean probably not, but in a polite way that keeps the conversation open. Exactly. And this leads us to an expression that has become incredibly popular in modern English. I'm trying to be more intentional with my time. When someone says this, they mean they're choosing their activities more carefully. They're not just saying yes to everything anymore, right? And that leads us to another very common phrase, "I'm trying to prioritize rest." This means the person is choosing rest over social plans or extra commitments. Let's look at another realistic, everyday dialogue. "Do you want to join us for dinner?" "Thanks, that's really kind of you. But I think I'm going to stay in tonight. I'm trying to slow down a bit." No worries at all. Take care of yourself. Notice the tone of this conversation. It's warm. It's polite. It's relaxed. There's no drama and no tension, just clear, kind communication. Now let's introduce another very common topic in natural English, personal tastes and lifestyle choices. People love talking about their favorite foods, activities, hobbies, and routines. But they almost never talk about them in a strict or formal way. Instead, you hear things like, "I'm really into cooking lately." "I've been getting back into reading." "I'm trying to be more active." "I got hooked on that series." "I'm obsessed with this new cafe." Very conversational. Very real. And when people don't like something, the language stays just as casual. You'll hear, "I tried it, but it wasn't for me." "I'm not really feeling it." "I couldn't get into it." "It didn't click with me." These expressions communicate personal preference gently without shutting down the conversation. Now let's move into a more advanced nuance, uncertainty and changing your mind. Native speakers use expressions like, "I'm torn." "I keep going back and forth." "I changed my mind." "I talked myself out of it." "I talked myself into it." "It seemed like a good idea at the time." These are deeply human expressions, full of personality and emotion. Exactly. And they help the listener understand your thought process, which is a huge part of natural communication. Before we move into our next major topic, relationships, connection, and social dynamics, let's summarize what we've learned here. Native speakers rarely give simple yes or no answers. They express preferences softly, emotionally, indirectly, and often playfully. Everyday English is full of metaphor, hesitation, humor, and nuance. And the language of decisions and preferences is key to sounding natural at the C2 level. Now let's move into one of the richest areas of natural English, relationships. This is where native speakers use some of their most expressive, nuanced, and emotionally intelligent language. It's the kind of English you don't usually find in textbooks, but you hear it constantly in real life. Exactly. And what makes this topic so powerful is that everyone can relate to it. Everyone has friendships, family relationships, coworkers, acquaintances, people they get along with, and people they struggle with. And the way native speakers talk about these dynamics is full of warmth and subtle meaning. Let's start with something simple, talking about people you feel comfortable with. Here are some extremely common expressions. I feel like I can be myself around them. They're really easy to talk to. We just click. There's a good vibe between us. They get me. These aren't formal sentences. They're warm, emotional, and very natural. Yes, we just click is one of the most powerful expressions in English. It means you get along instantly and effortlessly. And of course, the opposite also exists. You might hear, we don't really click. Our personalities don't mesh well. The vibe feels off. There's some tension between us. Again, all very common. And here's something important to notice. The word vibe has become one of the most frequently used words in modern English. It can describe a feeling, an atmosphere, a person's energy, or even a whole situation. You'll hear things like, it's got a nice vibe. I'm not loving the vibe here. The vibe feels weird today. All of these sound completely natural to native speakers. Very modern. Very natural. Now let's talk about friendships. People describe their friends in many different ways, but the meaning is usually emotional, not formal. You'll hear things like, they're the kind of person you can rely on. They always show up for me. We go way back. They're my go-to person. We've been through a lot together. Those last two expressions are especially meaningful. Your go-to person is the person you turn to when you need support, advice, or comfort. It's the first person you think of when something good or bad happens. And we've been through a lot together means the relationship has history. You've shared experiences, challenges, and important moments. It shows depth and trust. Of course, relationships aren't always easy. So let's talk about the language native speakers use when there are challenges or misunderstandings. In English, people usually soften difficult messages. They try not to sound aggressive or confrontational. You'll hear phrases like, there's been some miscommunication. I think we're not on the same page. I feel like something's been off lately. I didn't mean for it to come across that way. I think we should talk things through. These expressions allow people to bring up problems calmly and respectfully. Another very important skill in English-speaking cultures is disagreeing politely. Instead of saying, you're wrong, people say, I see where you're coming from, but I hear you, but I see it differently. I get your point, but I don't fully agree. That's a fair point, but here's my take. These phrases let you stay honest without damaging the relationship. And something native speakers do all the time is use I feel statements. This is a way to talk about emotions without blaming the other person. For example, I feel unheard. I feel overwhelmed. I feel disconnected. I feel like we're misunderstanding each other. This kind of language is extremely common, especially in the US, Canada, and Australia. Now let's move into something lighter and more fun, meeting new people. People describe first impressions in very natural ways. You'll hear, they seem really genuine. They give off a friendly vibe. They seemed a bit guarded at first. They're easy to be around. They made a really good impression. These phrases are everywhere in casual conversation. And one of the most universal expressions is this, they're good people. It's simple, but very powerful. It's a warm, positive way to talk about someone's character. Now let's talk about something more personal, emotional needs and communication needs. Native speakers are very comfortable saying things like, I need a bit more reassurance. I need clearer communication. I need you to be straightforward with me. I need some space to process things. This language isn't just for romantic relationships. You hear it with friends, family members, coworkers, and even in group projects. And here's a phrase every advanced learner needs to know because it's used constantly. I don't want to make things awkward. People say this when they want to talk about something sensitive, but still protect the relationship. Now let's explore language around trust and reliability. Positive expressions include, I trust them completely. They've never let me down. They're someone I can count on. They follow through on what they say. They keep their word. These phrases are important in both personal and professional life. And of course, there are gentle ways to express the opposite. You might hear, they're a bit unreliable. They mean well, but they don't always follow through. They're inconsistent. They're not the easiest person to work with. I'm not sure I can depend on them. Notice how even criticism is softened. English often avoids harsh or direct language. And finally, one of the most important modern phrases of all, they respect my boundaries. This comes up constantly in conversations about healthy relationships and emotional well-being. Let's end with a very natural dialogue. Connection and social dynamics. How's everything going with your new team? Pretty good, actually. Everyone's been really supportive. That's nice to hear. Yeah, the communication is clear and people respect each other's boundaries. That makes such a difference. Simple, natural, real. This kind of conversation is actually very normal in workplaces all over the world, right? And that's a perfect moment to move into our next topic, how people talk at work, especially when it comes to collaboration, teamwork, and professional communication. Because here's something many learners don't expect. The language people use at work is often softer, more indirect, and more emotionally aware than you might think. In this section, we're going to look at how native speakers talk about things like giving feedback, receiving feedback, disagreeing professionally, and handling awkward or tricky conversations. But before we fully move on, here's the key takeaway from the previous section. If you want to sound natural in English, you need to be able to talk about relationships, emotions, and connection using soft, human language. That ability is one of the core pillars of true C2 level fluency. All right, now let's step into a world that almost every adult has to navigate at some point, the workplace. And let me tell you, native speakers use some of their most nuanced, polite, indirect, and emotionally intelligent language at work. This is also an area where advanced learners often struggle, not because of vocabulary, but because of tone. People sometimes sound rude or too direct without meaning to, simply because they haven't learned the soft workplace phrasing yet. In professional settings, people usually don't speak very directly, especially when they're talking about problems, disagreements, deadlines, performance, or mistakes. Instead, they rely on gentle phrasing, collaborative language, and indirect suggestions. Let's start with something very common, checking in and confirming understanding. You'll hear phrases like, "Just to clarify, can I double-check something? Let me make sure I'm understanding you correctly." So, what you're saying is, just to confirm, we're on the same page, right? These expressions help prevent misunderstandings, and they sound professional without sounding stiff or formal. Here's another phrase you'll hear constantly in English-speaking workplaces. Does that work for you? It's a polite, friendly way to ask if someone is okay with a plan, a deadline, or a suggestion. Now let's talk about giving feedback, especially when the feedback isn't entirely positive. Native speakers almost never say, "This is wrong. I don't like this." Instead, they soften the message. They say things like, "Have you considered trying? One thing we might want to adjust is, it might flow better if we. I think there's room to improve this part. What if we approached it from another angle?" All of these phrases turn criticism into collaboration. They make it feel like a shared problem, not a personal attack. The same thing happens when people disagree in meetings. Instead of saying, "I disagree," you'll hear, "I see your point, but I have a slightly different perspective. I hear what you're saying, though I'm not fully convinced. I'm not sure that's the direction we want to go. I think we might need to rethink this part. I have some concerns about that approach." The disagreement is still clear, but the tone stays respectful and calm. There are also a few classic workplace expressions you'll hear all the time. One of my favorites is, let's circle back to that. This means let's talk about this again later without rejecting the idea. Another very common one is, let's table that for now. That means let's pause this topic and come back to it later. These phrases are extremely common in meetings, especially in the US and Canada. Now, let's look at how people ask for help at work. Native speakers rarely say, "Help me with this." Instead, they say, "Could you give me a hand with this? Do you mind taking a quick look? Would you be able to walk me through this? Can you clarify what you meant by that? I could use a second opinion." These expressions sound polite, collaborative, and professional. They show humility, which is very important in workplace culture. And when people offer help, you'll hear things like, "Let me know if you need anything. I'm happy to support however I can. I can take care of that if you'd like. Want me to handle this part? Do you want to tag team this?" Tag team is very natural and means working together on the same task. Overall, workplace English isn't about sounding smart or formal. It's about sounding clear, respectful, flexible, and human. And once you start using this kind of language, your English instantly feels more natural, more confident, and more professional. Now let's move into a slightly heavier topic, handling pressure, deadlines, and stress at work. This is something everyone deals with, and native speakers talk about it in very specific, very human ways. People often say things like, "I'm under a lot of pressure right now. I'm juggling a lot of deadlines. I'm feeling pretty stretched thin. I could really use more time on this. This week has been nonstop." This kind of language is important because it shows honesty and vulnerability, but it still sounds professional. You're not complaining, you're explaining your situation. And when someone needs more time, native speakers usually don't say, "I can't finish this." Instead, they soften the request. They say things like, "Is there any flexibility with the deadline? I might need a bit more time to give this my best. I want to make sure the quality is there. Could we extend this slightly?" These phrases are extremely common, especially in modern and remote work environments. They show responsibility instead of weakness. Now let's talk about something everyone experiences at work, meetings. If you want to sound natural in meetings, here are some expressions you'll hear all the time. Let's jump right in. Before we wrap up, who wants to kick things off? That brings us to the next point. Any updates on this? And one very important phrase, let's take this offline. This doesn't mean the internet is down. It means, let's talk about this privately later, not in the meeting. Another big part of workplace communication is managing emotions professionally. When someone feels frustrated but wants to stay calm, they might say, "I need a moment to process this. I want to make sure I respond thoughtfully. This has been a challenging situation. I'm trying to stay constructive here." And when someone wants to prevent conflict, you'll hear, "Let's keep the conversation productive. Let's focus on solutions. I don't want this to turn into a bigger issue." All of these phrases help keep the tone calm and respectful, even in difficult situations. Now let's move into something more positive, recognition and appreciation. Workplaces aren't only about feedback and pressure. People also acknowledge good work. Common expressions include, "Great job on this. I really appreciate your work here. You handled that really well. Thanks for stepping up. This wouldn't have happened without you." These phrases help build trust and strong working relationships, and you'll hear them constantly in healthy work environments. Work and personal dynamics often overlap, too. When a coworker seems stressed or upset, people often say, "Hey, you okay? You seem a bit off today. If you need to talk, I'm here. Take a breather if you need one. Let me know how I can support you." This kind of caring, human language is very common in modern workplaces. Let's look at a short, realistic workplace conversation. Did you have a chance to look at the proposal? Yeah, I went through it this morning. It looks solid, but there are a couple of areas we might tweak. Okay, What are you thinking? I think the introduction needs a bit more clarity. We can walk through it together if you want. Sounds good. Let's circle back after lunch. That short exchange contains many high-frequency native expressions that people use every day at work. Now let's transition into something just as important and just as universal: self-improvement, goals, habits, and personal growth. This is a huge part of modern English because people are constantly talking about how they're trying to improve their lives. And the interesting thing is that native speakers don't talk about self-improvement in a dramatic or philosophical way. They talk about it casually, honestly, sometimes humorously, sometimes vulnerably. This is the kind of language you hear in cafes, at the gym, during late-night conversations, or while walking with a friend. Here are some extremely common expressions people use when they're working on themselves. I'm trying to get my life together. I'm working on being more consistent. I'm trying to break some old habits. I'm slowly getting into a better routine. It's a work in progress. That last one, it's a work in progress, might be one of the most common expressions in English. People use it to talk about their health, their goals, their mindset, their career, their self-care. It's gentle, realistic, and very human. And speaking of self-care, that naturally leads us into language around taking care of yourself, both physically and mentally, which is exactly where we'll go next. Mentally and emotionally, people talk a lot about learning to slow down and take better care of themselves. You'll hear expressions like, I'm learning to take things slower. I'm trying to be kinder to myself. I'm working on setting healthier boundaries. I'm focusing on what really matters. I'm trying not to put too much pressure on myself. These aren't just random phrases. They reflect a modern way of communicating, especially in English-speaking cultures. Mental health, self-awareness, and emotional balance are talked about openly, so the language naturally reflects that. And when someone hasn't been doing great lately, they usually don't say it dramatically. They say things like, I fell out of my routine. I've been slipping a little bit. I lost momentum. I'm trying to get back on track. I got overwhelmed and hit pause for a while. These expressions show honesty without shame, which is very common in modern English. Now let's talk about motivation, because this is something people talk about all the time, often in a joking or self-aware way. You'll hear things like, I'm motivated until I'm not. I go through phases. Some days I'm killing it. Other days I'm barely holding it together. I'm good at starting things, not finishing them. I need a little push sometimes. This is the language of real life. Not perfect. Not inspirational quotes. Just honest. And very often, people use humor to soften how hard self-improvement can feel. They might say, I'm trying to get my act together, one tiny step at a time. I'm doing the bare minimum, but at least I'm doing something. I had big plans, but reality said no. I'm trying, but my bed is very persuasive. These lines are funny, but they also express real struggle in a relatable way. Now, let's go a bit deeper. People also use English to talk about identity and long-term growth, and this language is often very reflective. You might hear, I'm trying to figure out who I want to be. I'm learning what really matters to me. I'm trying to outgrow old patterns. I'm working on becoming more patient. I'm trying to develop better habits. These statements show vulnerability and emotional maturity, which is a key part of advanced, natural English. Another huge theme is balance. People talk constantly about trying to balance work, health, relationships, rest, productivity, hobbies, everything. So you'll hear, I'm trying to find a healthier balance. I tend to overcommit, and I'm working on that. I'm learning not to burn myself out. I'm trying to slow down and be more present. I need to pace myself better. All of these expressions show awareness and intention, not perfection. Let's look at a very natural mini conversation. How's your new routine going? Pretty well, actually. But I'm still trying to find my rhythm. Yeah, that takes time. Exactly. I'm learning to take things one step at a time. This is how real people talk. Simple, honest, and human. Another common part of self-improvement language is talking about habits people want to start. You'll hear, I've been meaning to read more. I'm trying to get back into journaling. I want to be more organized. I've been thinking about starting therapy. I'm working on being more disciplined. Nothing formal. Nothing dramatic. Just everyday conversation. And then there's the other side, habits people want to stop. People say things like, I'm trying to cut back on screen time. I need to stop procrastinating so much. I've been trying to stop overthinking. I'm working on not being so hard on myself. I'm trying to avoid burning out again. These expressions show internal struggles in a gentle, honest way. Now let's touch on one of the biggest ideas in personal growth, motivation versus discipline. English speakers talk about this a lot, and they usually say things like, motivation comes and goes. You can't rely on motivation alone. It's more about building systems. Discipline shows up when motivation doesn't. I'm trying to create habits that feel sustainable. Notice how the language is calm and realistic, not strict or extreme. And finally, there's accountability, another very common topic. People often say, I need someone to hold me accountable. Tell me to stick to my plan. I do better when I check in with someone. I work better with structure. These phrases aren't just about work or productivity. They're deeply personal. And this naturally leads into the next important topic, setbacks. Because no one grows without setbacks, and the way people talk about failure, recovery, and starting again is another huge part of natural, advanced English. If you want, I can. Everyone experiences setbacks, doubts, and moments of frustration. That's completely normal. And the language native speakers use to talk about these moments is extremely useful. People often say things like, I hit a rough patch. I lost my motivation. I had a setback, but I'm bouncing back. I slipped up, but I'm not giving up. I'm trying not to be too hard on myself. These expressions are emotionally honest, realistic, and very common. They show struggle, but also resilience. And when someone reflects on a difficult experience and learns something from it, they usually say, it taught me a lot. It put things into perspective. It made me rethink things. It helped me grow. It was a wake-up call. That word perspective comes up all the time in natural English. It means seeing things more clearly, often after something challenging. Let's end this part with a very natural, everyday conversation. How's your self-improvement journey going? Honestly, slowly, but I'm making progress. That's all that matters. Yeah, I'm learning to trust the process. Trust the process is an extremely common expression. It means believing that growth takes time, even when progress feels slow. Now, let's move into another big and very important topic in advanced English: expectations, pressure, ambition, and purpose. This is something every adult deals with, no matter their culture, job, or stage of life. These ideas shape how people talk about their choices, their goals, and their future. And the language native speakers use around these topics is rich, emotional, and very layered. One important thing to understand is that native speakers rarely talk about ambition in a formal or textbook way. They don't usually say, my objective is to achieve my long-term goals. Instead, they say things like, I'm trying to figure out what I really want. I'm still exploring my options. I'm not sure what my next step is. I'm thinking about switching things up. I want to feel excited about what I'm doing. These expressions show uncertainty, but also curiosity and openness. When people talk about pressure, the language becomes even more indirect and metaphorical. You'll hear, I feel like there's a lot on my shoulders. I'm carrying a lot right now. I'm holding myself to a really high standard. I'm feeling pulled in different directions. I'm trying to manage everyone's expectations. These phrases describe emotional weight without sounding dramatic. Instead of saying, I'm stressed because of expectations, people usually say, it's been a little overwhelming lately. I've had a lot on my plate. I'm trying not to get ahead of myself. I'm feeling the pressure a bit. All of this sounds natural, relatable, and emotionally aware. Now let's talk about ambition, because people express it in very different ways. Some people are very goal-driven. Others are more relaxed. Many people fall somewhere in between. Here's how native speakers often talk about ambition. I've got big plans. I'm aiming higher. I know I'm capable of more. I want to challenge myself. I feel ready for the next chapter. And sometimes ambition sounds quieter and more personal. I want a life that feels meaningful. I want to do work I'm proud of. I want to feel fulfilled. These expressions show depth without sounding intense or dramatic. When people feel they're putting too much pressure on themselves, you'll often hear, I'm being too hard on myself. I'm setting the bar way too high. I need to be more realistic. I'm expecting too much too quickly. These phrases show self-awareness and emotional growth. Now, let's talk about purpose. In English-speaking cultures, people talk about purpose a lot, but usually in simple, everyday ways. You'll hear things like, I want to do something that matters. I'm trying to find what feels right for me. I'm still figuring out my purpose. I want to feel like I'm moving in the right direction. I want to contribute to something bigger than myself. Again, nothing formal. Nothing philosophical. Just real people talking about meaning in their lives. Not academic. Just real. Now, let's connect this to something every listener can relate to, that feeling of not knowing if you're doing the right thing. Native speakers talk about this very openly, but in a soft and relatable way. You'll hear things like, I'm second-guessing myself. I'm not sure if I'm on the right track. I've been questioning a lot of things lately. I'm rethinking my priorities. I'm wondering if I'm heading in the right direction. This language doesn't sound dramatic or heavy. It just sounds human. And here's another big expression that comes up all the time. I don't want to settle. That means someone doesn't want to accept something that doesn't feel right. It could be a job, a relationship, a lifestyle, or even a mindset. The opposite idea is also very common. I'm learning to be okay with where I am. That means the person is trying to accept their current situation instead of constantly pushing or comparing. Now let's talk about external expectations. The pressure that comes from family, society, culture, or work. People often say, there's a lot of pressure to succeed. I feel like people expect me to have everything figured out. I'm trying not to live my life for other people. Everyone has opinions about what I should do. I'm trying to block out the noise. Block out the noise means ignoring advice, pressure, or opinions that don't actually help you. And here's a phrase you'll hear constantly in English at the end of the day. It's used to talk about what really matters. For example, at the end of the day, I just want to be happy. At the end of the day, it's my decision. At the end of the day, I'm the one living this life. Extremely natural. Extremely common. Let's bring in a short, real conversation. Do you ever feel like you should be further along in life? Yeah, all the time. But I'm trying to remind myself that everyone moves at their own pace. Exactly. There's no timeline we have to follow. This kind of conversation happens everywhere: cafes, offices, late-night talks, long walks with friends. And speaking of pace, here are some expressions native speakers use all the time when talking about life timing. I'm not in a rush. I'm taking things slow. I'll get there when I get there. I'm moving at my own pace. Things will fall into place. Fall into place means things will work out eventually, even if you can't see how yet. Now let's shift slightly into fear of failure, which is a huge emotional theme. People say, I'm afraid of messing things up. I don't want to disappoint anyone. I'm scared of making the wrong choice. I don't want to waste time. I'm worried I'm not good enough. And when someone wants to encourage another person, they usually say, "You're doing better than you think. Give yourself some credit. You're exactly where you need to be. You'll figure it out. You've got this." These phrases show support, not pressure. Now let's talk about purpose versus expectation, where a lot of emotional language lives. People say, "I don't want to live on autopilot. I want a life that feels intentional. I don't want to chase things that don't fulfill me. I'm trying to create a life that feels meaningful. I want to live in a way that actually feels like me." This is modern English. Personal, reflective, honest. Before we move on, here's one more natural mini dialogue. How are you doing with everything? Honestly, I feel a little lost, but I'm trying to trust that things will make sense eventually. I get that. Just take it one step at a time. Yeah, I'm working on it. Soft, supportive, real. Now let's move into something just as rich and universal: memories, nostalgia, regrets, and lessons learned. This is where English becomes deeply emotional and beautifully expressive. When people talk about the past, childhood, old friendships, big decisions, mistakes, their language becomes slower, softer, and more reflective. Let's start with nostalgia. You'll hear expressions like, "That takes me back. That brings back memories. I haven't thought about that in ages. It feels like a lifetime ago. Those were simpler times." These phrases carry warmth and emotion. And when someone remembers a specific moment, they might say, "I can still picture it like it was yesterday. I remember that so clearly." This is the kind of language that shows emotional depth, and this is exactly the level of English that separates advanced from truly fluent. That moment is still vivid in my mind. This kind of phrase is extremely common in storytelling and everyday conversation. People use it when a memory feels clear, strong, and emotional, even after many years. Now let's talk about childhood and growing up, because this is one of the most common topics when people feel nostalgic. People often say things like, "I used to spend hours doing that. That was my favorite thing when I was a kid. I miss how carefree life felt back then. We didn't realize how good we had it. I wish I could go back just for a day." These sentences are emotional, but they still sound casual and natural. They don't feel dramatic. They feel honest. And nostalgia isn't always happy. Sometimes it's bittersweet, a mix of warmth and sadness. People say, "It's funny how things change. Life felt so different back then. I didn't appreciate it at the time. I didn't realize how much I'd miss those moments. I wish I had slowed down and enjoyed it more." You hear these kinds of reflections all the time in movies, podcasts, conversations with friends, and quiet moments of thinking. Now, let's move into regret. Not big, dramatic regret, just the everyday kind that almost everyone experiences. Native speakers usually soften regret with gentle language. They say, "If I'm being honest, I wish I had handled that differently. I should have spoken up. I held myself back. I didn't know any better at the time. I let fear get in the way." Notice how none of these sound harsh or self-punishing. They're thoughtful, not judgmental. Sometimes people even use humor to talk about regret. "I made some questionable decisions. I was a mess back then. Let's just say I learned the hard way." This kind of humor makes regret feel lighter and more relatable. One of the most universal expressions you'll hear is, "I wish I could have told my younger self." People usually finish it with things like, "To be more confident," "To worry less," "To enjoy the moment," "That everything would work out," "To stop caring so much about what other people think." These ideas appear everywhere in English-speaking culture because almost everyone feels this way at some point. Now let's talk about lessons learned, because English has many natural expressions for growth and reflection. People say, It taught me a lot. It made me stronger. It changed me. It opened my eyes. It shaped who I am. It gave me perspective. All of these show emotional growth without sounding formal. When reflecting on a difficult moment, people often say, "At the time, I didn't see the bigger picture. I didn't understand what it meant for me yet. It took me a while to process it. I can see it more clearly now. I needed that experience more than I realized." This kind of language shows maturity and self-awareness. A very common idea you'll hear is, "If I hadn't gone through that, I wouldn't be where I am today." You hear this in interviews, speeches, and personal conversations all the time. Now let's talk about relationships from the past, because the language here is very gentle and natural. People say, "We drifted apart. We lost touch. We went our separate ways. We're on good terms, but not close anymore. We're not in each other's lives the way we used to be." These expressions describe distance without anger or drama. People also talk about reconnecting. "We reconnected recently. It was nice catching up. It felt like no time had passed. We picked up right where we left off." These phrases show warmth and familiarity. Another very common reflection is, "I've changed a lot since then. I'm not the same person I used to be." People use these lines when talking about growth, mistakes, or major life changes. Let's finish with a small, natural dialogue. Do you ever think about the past and wonder how different things could have been? Yeah, all the time. But then I remind myself that everything led me to where I am now. That's true. Honestly, I'm grateful for the lessons, even the hard ones. This is real English. Quiet, reflective, emotional, and deeply human. This gentle, thoughtful tone is extremely common in English. It's calm, honest, and emotionally grounded. People use it when they talk about their lives, their memories, and the things that shaped them. And speaking of gratitude, let's look at how native speakers express appreciation for the past. People often say, "I'm grateful for that chapter of my life. I'm thankful for the people who supported me. I didn't realize it then, but I see the value now. That experience taught me resilience. I'm a better person because of it." These sentences show growth and understanding. They don't erase the difficulty of the past, but they recognize its importance. Now let's explore nostalgia through the senses, something English speakers do very naturally. Memories are often connected to smells, sounds, weather, or small details. People say things like, "The smell of rain reminds me of home." "A certain song can take me back instantly." "The sound of summer nights brings back everything." That place carries so many memories. This kind of language feels emotional and almost poetic, but it's still very natural and conversational. You'll also hear deeper reflections like, "That chapter of my life feels unfinished. I still think about what could have been." Some memories stay with you. Some people leave a mark. These expressions show how the past continues to live in the present. Now let's talk about moving on, which is another very important theme. People say, "I've made peace with it. I've let it go. I've grown past that. I'm closing that chapter. I'm ready for a fresh start." These phrases give a sense of closure and emotional balance. Here's a short, very natural dialogue. Do you ever regret anything from your past? Of course, but I try not to dwell on it. How do you do that? I try to focus on what I learned instead of what I lost. This is extremely native English. Calm, thoughtful, and grounded. Now let's move forward into another powerful area of advanced English: dreams, imagination, creativity, inspiration, and the future. This is where English becomes hopeful, expressive, and forward-looking. When native speakers talk about their dreams, they don't usually sound dramatic. Their language is gentle and realistic. They say, "I've always dreamed of doing that. One day, I'd love to make that happen. It's something I've been thinking about for years. I can picture myself doing that someday. I'm not there yet, but I'm working toward it. These phrases feel hopeful, but grounded in reality. You'll also hear language about imagination and curiosity, such as, "Sometimes I wonder what my life would look like if I tried that." I love imagining different possibilities. It's fun to think about where life might take me. I'm curious to see what the future holds. I like exploring new ideas just to see what sticks. See what sticks means trying things without pressure, just to see what works. Now let's talk about creativity, because creativity appears everywhere, at work, in hobbies, in problem solving, and in self-expression. People say, "I'm feeling inspired lately." "I'm in a creative mood." "I hit a creative block." "I'm trying to get my creative energy back." "I had a sudden spark of inspiration." All of these are very natural expressions. When people talk about starting something new, they often say, "I've been wanting to try something different." "I'm experimenting with new ideas." "I'm stepping out of my comfort zone." "I'm playing around with some concepts." "I'm exploring a new direction." These phrases show curiosity, openness, and quiet courage. And one very common modern expression is, "I'm trying to tap into my creativity." This means trying to connect with your creative side without pressure or expectation. This is how native speakers talk about the future, not with certainty, but with openness, hope, and imagination. Now let's talk about future-oriented language, because this is one of the areas where advanced English becomes especially expressive and emotional. Native speakers often talk about the future in a hopeful but realistic way. They don't sound extreme or overly confident. Instead, their language feels open, calm, and thoughtful. People often say, "I'm excited for what's ahead." "I'm hopeful about the future." "I feel like good things are coming." "I'm ready for a new chapter." "I'm open to whatever life brings." These expressions show optimism, but they also leave room for uncertainty. That balance is very natural in English-speaking cultures. Then there's vision language, the way people imagine a bigger future for themselves. You'll hear phrases like, "I see myself growing in that direction." "I want to build something meaningful." "I have a bigger picture in mind." "I'm dreaming bigger these days." "I'm planning ahead, but trying to stay flexible." This mix of ambition and realism is extremely common. People want more, but they also understand that life doesn't always go exactly as planned. Here's a very natural mini dialogue. "So, what's next for you?" "Honestly, I've been thinking about starting my own thing." "Really? That's exciting." "Yeah, I'm still figuring it out, but it feels like the right direction." "That's awesome. You should go for it." Conversations like this happen everywhere, in coffee shops, during late-night calls, or while walking home after dinner. They're casual, supportive, and full of possibility. Now let's talk about fear and doubt, because dreams almost always come with them. People often say, "I want to try, but I'm scared." "What if I'm not good enough?" "I don't know if I have what it takes." "It's risky, but it feels right." "I'm afraid of failing, but I'm more afraid of not trying." That last sentence is extremely common in real conversations. It captures how fear and courage often exist at the same time. When people encourage each other, the language becomes gentle and supportive. They say, "You never know what could happen." "You owe it to yourself to try." "You're more capable than you think." "You might surprise yourself." The first step is always the hardest. These phrases don't push aggressively. They offer reassurance and quiet confidence. Now let's talk about taking action, because dreams stay ideas unless you move toward them. Native speakers often say, "I'm taking small steps." "I've started putting things into motion." "I'm doing what I can with what I have." "I'm slowly building momentum." "I'm making progress, even if it's slow." This kind of language is practical and encouraging. It focuses on movement, not perfection. One of the most common self-growth sentences in English is, "I'm not where I want to be yet, but I'm closer than I was." Now let's look at the emotional side of change, feeling stuck and wanting something new. People often say, I feel like I'm outgrowing my old life. I'm craving change. I need something different. I feel stuck, but I'm trying to move forward. I'm ready for something new. These expressions describe transition. They don't mean everything is wrong, just that something is shifting. Then there's the language of possibility, some of the most hopeful English you'll hear. People ask themselves, what if it actually works out? What if this is the start of something great? What if I'm meant for more? What if I surprise myself? What if everything goes right? These questions open space for courage and imagination. Here's another very natural dialogue. Do you ever feel like you're meant to do something bigger? Yeah, all the time. What stops you? Mostly fear and overthinking. That makes sense. But maybe the fear means it matters. Yeah, maybe it's worth trying. This tone is incredibly authentic. Soft, honest, and emotionally aware. Before we move into the final section, we need to talk about hope, because even quiet hope plays a huge role in natural English. People often say, I have a good feeling about this. I'm trying to stay hopeful. I think things will fall into place. I'm keeping an open mind. I believe something good is coming. These aren't dramatic promises. They're everyday expressions of optimism. And here's a final reflective thought that native speakers use often. I'm learning that sometimes you don't need the whole path figured out. You just need to take the next step. Coming up next is the final section of the podcast, where everything comes together. This is where we slow down, reflect, connect emotionally, and end with a long, natural conversation that feels real and grounding. We're almost at the end of this long, reflective journey. But before we wrap things up, let's take a moment to bring everything together. Throughout this episode, we talked about routines, stress, boundaries, emotions, relationships, workplace communication, self-improvement, ambition, nostalgia, dreams, and the future. And what all of these topics have in common is simple but powerful. They show how real people actually speak in real life. Exactly. And the more you listen to this kind of natural language, the more fluent you become, not just in vocabulary, but in tone, rhythm, emotional expression, and confidence. Fluency isn't only about knowing the right words. It's about knowing how things feel when they're said. Before we officially close, let's move into one last area of everyday conversation: how people ground themselves, find peace, and stay centered. This kind of language is soft, calm, and very common in daily life. People use it when they're overwhelmed, when they're reflecting, or when they're trying to take care of themselves. You'll often hear expressions like, I'm trying to stay present. I'm focusing on the little things. I'm learning to slow down. I'm taking things as they come. I'm trying not to get caught up in the chaos. These phrases show awareness and perspective. They don't rush anything. They don't force solutions. When people talk about finding clarity, they often say, I need some quiet time to think. I'm trying to clear my head. I need to step back and look at the bigger picture. I'm figuring things out one step at a time. I'm trying to reconnect with myself. This kind of language comes up constantly in conversations about balance and mental health. And when people realize they've been carrying too much, you'll hear, I need to let go of some things. I'm releasing what I can't control. I'm trying to lighten my load. I'm learning to pick my battles. I'm choosing peace. That last one, I'm choosing peace, has become extremely common in modern English. It's simple, but very powerful. Here's a short, natural dialogue that captures this feeling. How have you been feeling lately? Honestly, a bit overwhelmed. Yeah, I get that. But I'm trying to slow down and breathe. Life can pile up fast. Exactly. I'm learning to take things day by day. That really helps. Be gentle with yourself. This kind of conversation happens every day between friends, siblings, coworkers, and people who genuinely care. Now, let's bring everything full circle and return to something we mentioned at the very beginning of this episode, the journey from good English to effortless English. That final stage of fluency, the last 10%, doesn't come from memorizing grammar rules or studying complicated vocabulary. It comes from absorbing natural patterns, from noticing how people soften their language, how they express emotions indirectly, how tone changes meaning, how simple phrases carry deep feelings, how hesitation, humor, and small details make conversations feel real. That's why listening to long-form, natural conversation like this is so valuable. It trains your ear not just to understand what is being said, but how it's being said. Over time, you start to notice the rhythm. You catch the subtle shifts. You hear the emotion behind the words. And without forcing anything, you slowly begin to sound more natural yourself. Before we close, let's talk briefly about connection. Because no matter what language you're learning, everything comes back to connection. Every conversation, every expression, every nuance is really about understanding and being understood. People say things like, "I appreciate you being here. It means a lot to me. I'm grateful for this conversation. Thanks for listening. I'm glad we talked." These are simple sentences, but they carry real emotional weight. And you hear them everywhere because they're human. Let's end with one last natural exchange. "Hey, this was really nice." "Yeah, I enjoyed talking through all of this." "Same. It felt grounding, like a deep breath." "Yeah, conversations like this remind me what really matters." "Me too. Thanks for showing up." Always. Soft. Simple. Honest. Completely natural. And now it's time to wrap things up. To everyone listening, thank you for spending this time with us. Thank you for showing up for your English. Thank you for investing in yourself, your growth, and your fluency. Remember, your progress is real, even when you don't always see it. Every minute you spend listening, absorbing, repeating, and internalizing is moving you forward. Fluency isn't something you suddenly achieve. It's something you slowly grow into. Take what you learned today, let it settle, and keep going. We're proud of you. We believe in you. And we'll see you in the next episode of Feel Learns English.